New Mexico Senate Bill 19 took effect on the 1st of this month. Now, that bill is designed to prevent abuse and exploitation of incapacitated persons under the court-ordered guardianship or conservatorship. Now, the reforms call for stricter reporting and oversight to provide greater transparency, there's that word, and better accountability, there's that word, over a New Mexico guardianship system that was recently shaken by scandal. The legislature allocated $1 million for implementing the reforms, which call for hiring auditors to make random compliance audits of contract guardians. Now, that money will also pay staff to examine about 20,000 court files to determine if the number of people currently under that guardianship. Here to talk about these reforms and other important topics are this week's Line Opinion panelists. Former State Senator Diane Snyder is with us. Jeffrey Candelaria, owner of Connections Now LLC and host of the Jeffrey Candelaria Show on 770 KKOB. Harry Van Buren here. He's the professor in UNM's Anderson School of Management, and former State Senator Dee Feldman is with us. Sorry, Dee. Diane, let me start with you. These reforms. That's right. A lot of criminal investigations. We were all horrified when these things broke. We're talking about, and I'm not kidding when I say this, the most vulnerable people in our state if you really, really think about it. What you have in control of your life and what you don't have in control of your life, that's in the control of others. Something needed to break here. Is this enough for you? Have we solved this in your view?
No, we haven't solved it all. Okay. I am thrilled to death with what they've done. Senate Bill 19 was certainly a major step in the right direction. I am delighted that the state auditor and the courts have formed a partnership to be able to do the audits. We joke about transparency and all those things that we nowadays, because they're so overused.
That's right.
But that is a very important part. One of the things that I struck me is that the families were excluded. Now the hearings will be open so that interested parties can hear.
That's right.
I didn't realize until we had all the scandal that we actually had corporations that acted as guardians.
Isn't that something?
That was, I mean, you talk about scary to me. And I think in terms of people I know, myself included, what will happen someday should I need one.
Right.
So I'm very pleased with the steps they're taking. But I think there's this is just the first step.
Gotcha. Harry, would you
do.
agree? A little bit more to go here? Or okay.
I mean, really a lot more to go.
Okay.
So first we've got to really give credit to the Albuquerque Journal for keeping on the case, story after story, and really driving the public policy in this area. But if you look at New Mexico compared to other states, we don't have standards or licensure related to guardianship or conservatorship.
Right.
So the money that we have is a good start, but it's only going to fund a lot of reviews of state files.
That's right.
Or state-funded files.
That's right.
What about all the folks that aren't state-funded?
Yeah.
So I really think there needs to be much more work in terms of certification. The openness, I think, is really good, but I would want to see everybody come back to the legislature and say, here's what we found, and here's where we really need to amp it up, because I would absolutely agree with Diane. It's a first step, it's inadequate by itself, but we need to do a lot more.
That's right. Dee, interestingly, your back of the envelope assessment, the million from the legislature, the 300,000 to clear up these cases, is that enough in your gut back of the envelope now that we know the scope of the problem? Or as Harry mentions, is the legislature going to have to come up with a little more money here to
Yes,
really
the
solve
legislature will have to come up with more money.
Okay.
I mean, this is a long-standing problem.
Right.
There is a backlog, and we heard about it when we were in the legislature 10 years ago, that people didn't even know how many wards of the court there were out there, how many incapacitated people. They couldn't get in touch with people that were supposed to be the guardians.
Right.
And we had an expert come in from Texas where they were dealing with the same problem, but until this journal story hit, it was never a high priority, and it was always in the hands of the courts and the court-appointed guardians. We heard about it most with people with developmental disabilities rather than seniors, but with the story about Blair Darnell, the senior aspect of it came to light, and people started focusing on that. This is a baby step. This is what the New Mexico legislature does best. create a study commission and, try to gather the information, do an audit, and then, no penalties, no new penalties, nothing really heavy-handed, but, we'll report back. $1 million,
For 20,000 files.
That's right. That's right. Jeffrey, backing up just a little bit here, interesting, this was news to a lot of people in this state. That not just the shenanigans of it, but the system, no one ever thinks about this. Like, what happens to folks that need to have...
I thought about it with all respect because this issue is extremely salient to me personally because when I was 9, my mother died, and I went through a traumatic court situation such that this custody and guardianship was something that affected my life at that time. Wow. And while my grandparents did the best they could to provide guardianship and conservatorship, I never knew to this moment how much revenue my mother actually provided after she died. And so what I'm encouraged about is the reporting that has to go on. I guess there are annual reports. In some cases, these reports and the reporting has to be held for at least 7 years, which talks to patterns of stewardship, which I think is extremely important. I'm also encouraged by the random auditing that will take place, particularly for those corporations that hold stewardship for many folks that are incapacitated. So I'm extremely encouraged because I think overall, the overarching point for me is it puts conservators and guardians on notice that they will be subject to scrutiny and accountability. So I'm encouraged extraordinarily. But of course, I come from a more visceral perspective because I was subject to that.
But
Absolutely.
like Dee Dee said, there has to be a penalty phase
well,
too.
now they do have to pay a bond.
Bond.
That's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
But for the future, once they determine what needs to be done, is there has to be a penalty for not doing it. So,
Let me ask you this, Diane. Interesting, our auditor, Wayne Johnson, made an interesting point that this covers state-funded situations, but we have a lot more out there that aren't state-funded.
yes.
Are they going to get the same kind of scrutiny? Are they going to get the same? You know what I mean? This could be a potential problem here.
Well, there are two things. One is I think it will open up and make aware the people who are providing those conservatorships that they're being noticed.
Gotcha.
That's right.
And that I would like Prof said, is have some training, some licensure, some kind of something.
Right.
Because one of the things I remember at the legislature hearing, well, oh, they're not a problem. They're all attorneys. They're, they're good guys. There can't be a problem. Well, then the Journal showed us how big a problem we have.
4.8 million embezzled.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly right.
So I think this is a first step, and I'm absolutely delighted that they took it. And I really respect Senator. His name just went.
Jim Smith.
Jim Smith.
Oh, right.
And then Damon Eli, Representative Eli.
That's right.
For taking the lead and getting this going.
That's right.
And then the courts.
There is a bit of a good government story here, if you think about it. There is some cooperation here. You got to throw in Judy Nakamura here.
Exactly
right?
across
Very strong language that we're going to fix this.
That's right.
It gives some courage.
It does. And while I think we've all agreed that much more needs to be done, the fact that there is interagency cooperation and across different parts of the government really is a positive step. What I hope happens is that the Journal keeps focusing on this issue, that the legislature keeps focusing on it, because only through that and through these agencies working together are we really going to make progress.
That's right. Jeffrey, let me read you a quote. I mentioned Wayne Johnson, our auditor. Interesting quote here. A critical safeguard for people who are relying on strangers to manage their life savings and expend it responsibly on their behalf. That's the system. When you think about that, strangers, like we don't even know who these people are.
Yeah.
We're talking about controlling people's money.
Well, particularly
And their health.
In their health. It's madness.
particularly the corporate guardianship mechanism.
Right.
It's my understanding with what research I did that in some cases some of the accreditation doesn't have to be in place as it does in other states. But what I'm also encouraged about is extended families for the folks that are incapacitated can now be part of the court hearing.
Yes.
Because when I went through this traumatic process when I was 9, it was almost a sequestration that and in those cases absolute exploitation can begin to happen because extended interested parties aren't part of that process. So I'm excited about and encouraged about the open forum such at hearings. I think that makes makes an enormous difference.
But talk about transparency. Harry said, these people aren't certified. There doesn't. Well, not only that, there must not have been a registry
Yeah.
of who they were.
That's right, yeah.
Because
Or who
if
they
they
were being
didn't
the
know
guardian
who
for.
they
That's right.
were,
That's right. Well, what
where
about
do you
this? What about the
start?
situation where you've got people who are relying on family members and friends for these kinds of use guardianship in quotes
yeah.
here, but you know what I mean? This happens in our homes. We like to romanticize this and say, "Oh, in the old days,
Yeah.
you would take in a relative, and everything allegedly worked out great." Well, it doesn't always work out great behind closed doors
It doesn't.
of everyone's home. You know what I mean? It's a tricky one. So how do we get the government into people's homes to make sure they're doing the right thing?
You know,
that gets very tricky.
I don't know now because my 92-year-old mother lives with me, and she is full a slight dementia occasionally, but short-term memory loss. But other than that, she is very viable. She gets around. She does whatever. So I don't manage. I help her manage.
Right.
But I don't have total control
Gotcha.
over her life because she doesn't need it.
Right.
So, but what about if the time should come, or if there are other people whose families do? What if I didn't love my mother dearly? What if I didn't want her
things
care
happen.
and good?
That's right.
And I don't know how we can get the government into homes to find out.
Right.
That's a very tricky
I'm feeling
slope.
you.
Yeah.
I'm feeling you. What do you think, Harold, on that one?
It is a tricky thing, but I think the same basic principles apply even in the case of family members. You'd obviously have to look at the ways you do reporting differently. The other thing, picking up on something that Diana pointed out, is the American Bar Association's done a lot of work in this area and has pointed out that a lot of people are in these very restrictive conservative relationships or guardian relationships where a less restrictive means of working with them and safeguarding their interests really would be more appropriate. And so I think here's also an area where a lot of research needs to be done. It's not just an either-or sort of thing. Could there be gradations, and particularly when there's a loved one involved?
Right. Good point that we have to at that point, it seems to me. Jeffrey, when you really think about this whole setup was ripe for the situation we ended up with before the journal popped it.
Yes.
It's so easy to look back, isn't it? And just say the things that we had in place, the secrecy.
Yes.
It was ripe for abuse. It was almost as if you were daring people to take money from these people.
But
it was so easy to do,
remember,
for
though,
gosh
Gene,
sake.
that the folks themselves that were, and I don't like to use the word victims, but subject to exploitation, they themselves are incapacitated.
Gotcha. Yep.
So they had no necessary platform or voice to talk about their situations. And it's important to also make a distinction inside the word guardianship that I believe conservators are more involved with the financial piece,
Yeah,
but then guardians have more say regarding the authority over health. What's more important than health? So
there you
even
go.
those dynamics inside the world of guardianship are important to recognize as well.
And are they getting to see their doctors the way they
right
should?
That's
kind
the
of
key.
Their medications.
That's the
and-
key. I mean, it does bring into focus the question that you're talking about. To what degree should the government intervene in a family?
Yeah.
Just the concept of
Yeah.
a government guardian for someone who is incapacitated does imply a protection of human rights, and that the government has a role to do that when health and safety
Yes.
are at issue.
right.
And the same remedies that we apply to other abuses should be applied here. Transparency being the first step.
That's right.
And Gene, too much government intervention may do the reverse and cause folks to be discouraged
Right.
from taking on those responsibilities.
That's right.
When most of those people are truly well intended.
That's right.
So we have to
But
be
that's
careful.
where they need
about that.
help as well. So if I'm a family member and I'm taking on this incredibly sensitive relationship, I need to be able to go to somebody just for help. on how to
Guidelines
do
are
that.
different than
Absolutely.
intervention.
Absolutely.
Exactly right. Have to end that there. Now, when we come back to the line, we'll look at the reactions to the 2018 Park Test score results.